Then let's introduce our next speaker. And our next speaker is Mary. Mary works for Schneider Electric. And I'm not sure if you are aware of all the things they're doing, but I can tell you it's a lot. And they're also doing a lot regarding their renewables program for their procurement and supply chain. And that's exactly the role Mary's pursuing right now. So I'm very happy that we have Mary here on stage and also later on our podcast. So enjoy, it's your stage.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thanks, everyone. First off, thank you so much to the organizers for inviting me, and thank you all for coming to hear me speak. So with that, I will go ahead and dive in. I'm going to start a bit high level today with just in general what Schneider Electric does. As Daniel mentioned, we are getting involved in a lot of different things. And so today, let's see if I can... Yep, there we go. Today I'll go through a little bit of decarbonization overview from our perspective at Schneider Electric. I'll talk about renewables, of course, and how you can think about it overall. I will talk mainly about supply chains today, but it's important to keep in mind that it's really applicable for everyone in every organization. Whenever we started thinking about supply chains, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel too much. So I can promise most of what you'll hear today is very applicable to your organization. So whenever you think about Schneider Electric, how many people of you here think about light switches and energy management equipment, uninterrupted power supplies? Yes, thank you. That's also what I tend to think about as well. But Schneider has many different business divisions, one of which is the sustainability business. And I've put up there all the different areas that we touch on. But what you can really take away is that we provide services for companies to help them on their sustainability journey, whether that be from a reporting aspect, maybe you need to submit to GRI, CSRD, et cetera. Maybe you need a strategy for how you plan to decarbonize. And what I would argue is most important, you need a way to get there in terms of how to actually decarbonize your operations. Schneider works really hard to be at the forefront of sustainability and work really hard to be one of the world's most sustainable companies. And we do that both within the sustainability business as well as within our own operations. We like to try to make a lot of our equipment to help you as companies to decarbonize as well. And so, for instance, we do help about 40% of the Fortune 500 globally today. And I'm part of a group of 3,300 employees that work with companies to help them reach their sustainability goals. So you can see some of the recognitions that we've gotten there. We are also SBTI aligned, so we have very aggressive SBTI targets as well. Let's move on to supply chain decarbonization. So in terms of supply chain decarbonization, I mentioned, we don't like to reinvent the wheel too much. And so for us, whenever we think about a supply chain, which for most companies is about 90% of their emissions overall coming from scope 3, we think about it in 3 distinct steps. The first is to design. So the first thing you need to know is what do you want to achieve overall? As an example, at Schneider, we have a goal to reduce our top 1,000 suppliers by 50% by the end of this year. And so for that, we need to design an overall program of how we plan to achieve that. The second is to engage. You need a plan for how to engage all 1,000 of those suppliers. Or, for instance, I think Bosch mentioned that you will have 3,500 or so. So you need to put together a very organized plan of how you're going to engage with your category managers, your sustainability team, and what exactly you want them to achieve. And then most importantly, you need them to decarbonize. So teaching them different ways to decarbonize. And I'll drill down specifically into that one for the rest of the presentation because renewables is a big part of that. But in terms of decarbonizing your supply chain and your own organization in general, you can think about them in 2 distinct parts. One is going to be your scope 1 emissions, and the second, your scope 2. Scope 1 is going to be everything that you really burn on site. So company vehicles, boilers, all those sorts of things where you're burning gas yourself. And the second is scope 2, which is going to come from your electricity, purchased electricity, heat, and cooling. And so from the Schneider, we focus on these different levers to help you or help supply chains to decarbonize, whether it's using less electricity, or maybe optimizing electrification systems, converting to electric heat pumps like we heard about earlier on, and most importantly, to also adopt renewable electricity. Whenever you all think about renewable electricity, how many of you all think of solar panels on the top of a facility? Yeah, me too. I also think of that. And the nice thing with renewables is there's so many more ways to acquire than looking to see if your roof is capable of handling a solar installation. And so you can see them there at the bottom, and I'll dig into each one more specifically. Digging into renewables a little bit, let's talk about why companies source renewables. Sustainability and environment, I think, is the most obvious one. I think that's what we've talked about most of over the last 2 days, is being environmentally conscious. But there are a lot of other factors that go into why a company would source renewables, whether it's economic factors, helping you to manage risk. I think the example we saw in Spain and Portugal is a good example of that in managing risk. Some companies, for instance, probably would have had their lights go out, whereas others that maybe have microgrids or installations of their own might have been a little bit more risk adverse. And reputational. So when I talk to companies, I tend to see a balance of these 4 different factors pan out in different ways. I think economic one is always strong, and one that I would say continues to drive a lot of decision making, but environmental, reputational, and risk are big ones as well. And so with these factors, we've seen a huge commitment to energy demand overall in 2 different ways. RE100, which is the graph you see there on the right, used to be, I would say, the main standard for sustainability goals. Everyone that wanted to show they were sustainable made an RE100 commitment, saying they're going to be 100% renewable by a certain date. That's still a big part, but SBTI has really become the gold standard and continues to be that today, of which renewable energy is also a very big part. The challenge with that rise in demand is that, unfortunately, today, we don't have as much renewable electricity as corporates are asking for. So you can see there those different bars are different ways that you can source renewables out in the market. And the gap that you see there is the overall gap that we have in the market for that demand. So it's really important that we do continue to see countries installing wind and solar installations, or else that gap is going to be unmet and the demand will kind of go, there pretty much will not be enough solar for everyone is the main question, or the main answer there. Going on to strategic foundations and looking at how you can source renewable electricity. I mentioned before that it's not just solar installations on your rooftop. There are actually 4 different ways that you can source renewable electricity as a corporation or one of your supply partners today. On-site, you can see, is that 3rd option. On-site is a great option and definitely something every company should look at. However, it comes with limitations. Not all countries have very attractive policies towards on-site solar, and it can cost money, or a green premium, as most people call it, to have that sort of facility. It tends to only also cover a certain percentage of your overall electricity needs. So if you have a manufacturing facility and you install solar on the top, maybe you'll be able to meet maybe 10 to 30% of your overall electricity needs. And so if you have a goal of 100% renewable, you need another way to fill that 70%-ish gap or so. And so that's where you see these other mechanisms come into place. The renewable electricity sector is underpinned by a system of certificates, which we call energy attribute certificates. Every market has different names for them. So for instance, in Europe, we go by the guarantees of origin system. The UK, REGOs, US RECs, and for most of the rest of the world, they go by international RECs or IRECs. And so these allow companies and utilities as well to meet both voluntary as well as regulatory compliance for renewable electricity and make sure that everybody has their kind of fair share, fair claim to renewables. Companies have the ability to buy and sell these separate from their power. And I would say every company that at least I speak to, as well as Schneider, has some form of this system in their overall strategy. The next option would be utilities. So this is probably one that's also well known to most of you. That's going to your local utility and asking them to source you renewable electricity. There are a lot of schemes like this, for instance, in Germany, Spain, France as well, that allow you to do that, but they normally come at a green premium. I talked about on-site solar. So the last option that we have here is off-site generation, or what we call power purchase agreements or virtual power purchase agreements. This is really where the corporate space is at play here today, is in this market. And it's definitely the most attractive. The reason why is it allows you to add new renewable electricity resources to the grid in what previously would not have existed, and allows you to do it at scale as well. So for instance, Schneider Electric and many other organizations contract with developers for power purchase agreements to meet our overall operational need. Currently, the European market in particular is very, very attractive for these sorts of agreements and is going to continue to be very attractive. Other schemes around the world are also opening up. The US has a very sizable market, as well as a lot of markets in Asia. And so this is really the place where companies want to source renewables from today. Using those different options, you can start to put together a strategy as a company or with your suppliers on how you want to meet renewable electricity goals. So making sure that you're compliant with standards like CDP, SBTI, RE100, really making sure that those certificates that I talked about are being attributed correctly and across your operations is essential. I'd also say, in terms of those 4 options, you tend to want to have a strategy that incorporates all 4 of those. And that's mainly to diversify and meet your needs at the different areas of which you're at. For example, a renewable electricity is not the same in every market. In some markets, you might be able to use on-site. Others, you might be able to use certificates. In Europe, hopefully, you're able to use PPAs. And so now for the rest of the presentation, I just want to dig in a little bit more into some very specific examples where we've used renewables with some of the programs here at Schneider. The first one is our very own program that I've talked to some of you about already. Schneider has a program called the Zero Carbon Project. And our goal is, I mentioned it before, is to reduce our top 1,000 suppliers by 50% of their total emissions across their companies by the end of this year. That program has been going for quite some time now. I think we started it back in 2020, so we have about a 2021 baseline for that initiative. And it's been tough. I'll admit it to this group. It's been tough to see the results that we need from our suppliers. You have to engage them very specifically and work with them on roadmaps. And so I've laid out some of the different ways that we have done that specifically with our supply chains globally in terms of working with them one-on-one, hosting in-person workshops. And what I would also say is a lot of repetition. Putting the message out there once or twice is not enough. You have to continually partner with your suppliers to help them to decarbonize. And so really excited to announce that we've reached 40% reduction in our financial earnings last year and hoping to reach that 50% by the end of this year. Another program I wanted to highlight that we've also been working on specifically within the renewable electricity space is our Energize program. The Energize program is a program across the healthcare and pharmaceutical sector. It has 25 companies in it, which you can see their logos there on the right side of the screen. And what we're doing with these 25 companies is inviting their suppliers into the program where they can learn all about renewable electricity and then how to source it. So today we've educated about 800 suppliers within that program and have had some great success in terms of helping them access the market in very unique ways. And so for next slide, we'll show that example. One thing about PPAs that I don't think I have mentioned is that it's typically something that's only accessible for large corporations. What we've been able to do in Energize is to start to pull some of those companies together to reduce that barrier to 1/5 of what it was previously. And so last year, we were really excited to announce 8 new solar projects that'll be newly built in Spain over the next couple of years with the following different companies, which you can see there on the right. The thing that I really love about this is you can see that some of the logos, they're like GSK, Teva, Takeda. These are all companies that were sponsoring the program. So with these specific cohorts or PPAs, they've partnered together with their suppliers and are really kind of putting their money where their mouth is in terms of support by entering into these projects with them. And with that, we've now contracted over 800 gigawatt hours of new capacity annually that will now fund 100% renewable energy for many of these companies. And so with that, that's the end of my presentation. If you do have any question about renewables or supply chain in general, please feel free to ask me. If you do want to learn more, you can learn more at zygo.com, which is the SaaS solutions that we use to power a lot of our supply chain decarbonization, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and take the conversation further. And with that, thank you so much.